Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds. We are back talking about the pursuit of the best. And this is going to be a tough one to say best, but at least in our eyes, the best inshore fishing rod. Now, this is critical. And right off the bat, we're going to hit you with something hard. The rod is more important than the reel. And like last time we talked about, what was it, simplicity and specialist? The rod is more important than the reel. For years, we thought the opposite. And part of it's, because of the industry. They've done combos and stuff forever. As kids, you get a combo and you just think, oh, yeah, I'm going to get a nice reel and get a free rod with it for my combo. Truth of the matter is, the rod is doing most of the work. And so we have been on this pursuit to find what we're calling like the perfect rod. And of course, perfection never really happens. So we're constantly looking for the next one. We've used the Tfo Pro Series for a long time. We've now got a custom bolt bay. We got another one that we're working on behind the scenes that we're going to talk about. And we're going to get your feedback as well on what you like in a rod. So we got Justin, who is going to be our kind of ghostly like conscience. We've got Luke and we've got Wyatt. If you guys are listening in, Justin had a few technical difficulties. And Wyatt, you mentioned earlier your parents are listening. I'm not going to ask you to show your sunburn, but I'm just going to make sure your parents know to say, oh,
Mom's going to kill me for not wearing sunscreen.
Yep,
I'm sorry,
welcome,
Mom.
Mr. and Mrs. Parcell. That we got to, and it's not us. Like we give Wyatt long sleeve performance material to wear, and he chose to wear a t-shirt out there. But when the bite's hot, sometimes you got to get your
go.
So Luke, Wyatt, who wants to kick? Justin the ghost, who wants to kick this off?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and just start. It is just to reiterate the fact that the rod is the most important. So the most important part of equipment you have for inshore fishing is your rod. As Joe said, it does most of the work, but I would say just as importantly, it does the most important work. Getting the strike is always the toughest thing. Once you get the strike, that's really what we need to be focused on, is just getting the strikes. Once you have the fish, that's when the reel starts coming into play. For spinning gear, as far as getting strikes, casting distance is huge. The reel doesn't really cast. What casts is the rod and the line. That's why we've been doing a lot of line tests. The line is actually more important than the reel, I would say. And it's really about matching the rod and the line and the lures that you're using, matching those together, and then just getting a reel that fits the budget is basically what I'm now doing. I used to, I think like all of us did, is we'd finally afford our special reel that we always wanted. And then, hey, what rod do I pair with it? That should never be the question. It should always be, okay, let me get my rod, and then what reel should I pair with the rod? So I just wanted to make sure that we hit that point hard.
So talk about what the rod does. Let's be very specific. Some people might still be scratching their head saying, all right, what does it do? I thought the reel's doing all the work.
Well, I mean, it's basically your arm, right? It's what casts the lure out, right? It's what retrieves the lure. It's what very importantly helps you feel the strikes, and then also once you feel the strike, it is what sets the hook. All that is the rod. Again, rod and line. The reel is a very small part of that equation. The reel comes in handy once you have the fish on. So for live bait anglers who aren't casting a lot, the reel starts getting elevated and in importance. But for artificial lures where you're doing a lot of casting, the rod just gets more and more important. So, but either way, having a good rod is crucial.
And it helps you fight the big fish. If you guys saw on the last podcast where I got my hiney whooped by a tarpon over a 30-minute fight, it was the rod. I mean, the reel, yes, it did work, but all reels have drag. We weren't maxing out. It was 10, 12 pounds, what pounds of drag. It wasn't that much. And all that reel did was just provide a little bit of the drag. The rod was, what I was doing a poor job of using to the maximum ability, but that's what does all the work to help you fight a fish. It's your leverage to bring the fish in. So it's everything. And like I said, for years, we thought the opposite. And even our dad, we were live bait guys. And so for the longest time, we switched to artificial lures and we're using the same live bait, pretty stiff rods. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And it's tough to cast. It's tough to do what you need to do with lures using a kind of a stiff, heavy live bait rod. So we're going to talk all about that. And Wyatt, anything to add before we talk about kind of where we came from and where we are today?
Yeah, I mean, you guys hit it really hard. All your reel is a line management system. If you want to get the most out of your fishing, the action that you put into your lure, your casting, all of these things that actually do contribute to getting strikes, it's all the rod. So, it took a lot of learning and a lot of mistakes for me to kind of figure out that I don't need to put my focus on the most expensive reel. What I need to start looking at is the components and rods, how they're made, my personal preferences. I'm going to talk on, even some custom rods that I've had built to just my personal specifications for the way that I fish. There's so many different things that go into a rod. And I think that, if you're going to open your wallet and spend money on fishing gear, you need to really think about, what you're purchasing with a rod and all the numbers and things. I never learned about what a medium fast was, or, all the different classifications and things. It was so confusing as somebody that didn't spend a whole lot of time on the water when I first started getting into fishing. So I just kind of went with what was on the combo. I made the same mistakes that you guys did. But when I took the time to actually learn about measurements and, the different actions that are in rods, I was able to, I saw my fishing game really improve because I could effectively work baits. I could cast further, all these things that really, like I said, do contribute to catching more fish. So I know we're going to dive into all that, but you're about to talk to a guy that came from most of the people listening to this podcast. I was in their position as well. Didn't know a lot about rods, but once I took the time to learn, I saw my fishing game step up. So I think this podcast is really going to help a lot of people really improve their fishing game through probably the most important piece of equipment that they can purchase.
Amen. Justin, blink twice if you can hear us.
Oh, that's adorable.
You guys are listening. Justin is blacked out here. We can't see his face, and but we can hear him. What was cool, Justin's our head of tackle, and we had that Bull Bay when we first came out with it. We had 25 or 26 of these custom rods made, and we did a pickup only. So insiders had to come into our store in Winter Haven, and they went in, I don't know, an hour or something. They were sold out from people all over. What a couple of people came from Marco Island, and quite a few hours away to get the rod, which is really cool. But I was in there for, I don't know, 30-40% of the people that came in. It was really cool to see Justin, who came, from Star Rods. I mean, he has a background in rods and rod building and knows probably more than most people. And it was cool to see him explain power versus action and why you might or might not want, split grips and all the reasons that we built that rod the way that we did. So Justin, can you share a little bit of that, kind of give the maybe 30,000 foot view of everything about a rod? Where's the money spent? What's really, really important with this? And then even talk about, I think a bad thing is these manufacturers, no one's really on the same page in terms of how they specify their rod spec. So talk about that real quick.
Yeah, sure. That's the nail on the head is, when we wanted to offer a baseline, like a foundation for if you're going to get into inshore fishing and you want a rod that's a general purpose, do everything, great for the flats, great for some live bait, dead bait applications. Sure, we can be really, really specific and change the blanks and the models and whatnot. But a good baseline that we've all found is a 7'6" rod, medium power, and fast action. Those are kind of the three main categories, if you will, of what we look at when we're trying to think a good baseline for a do everything inshore rod. But the biggest challenge that I don't know a lot of people realize is that there isn't any standardization amongst all these manufacturers on what a medium power rod is, or even fast action. The actions of rods are not all the same. You could take three manufacturers that have a 7'6" rod and a medium power, same line rating too, 8 to 17 pound line rating. And they could all say that they're fast action rods on the label themselves. But when you actually put them on a deflection graph and you bend them, which it's hard without having a visual, but a graph where if you
show it with your hands.
Yeah. Listen to my hands, please. If you put a rod up on a chart and you hung a 2-ounce sinker off the end of the rod and you see how much that rod bends, and when the bend stops and the rod starts to go straight, that's deflection. That's to be able to determine what is a fast rod, what is a moderate fast rod, what is an extra fast rod. Kind of, Luke's referred to it as a wet noodle. What does that tip feel like? Sometimes, when you work a lure and there's like a lot of reverb or there's a lot of movement on the tip of that rod, that a lot of times translates to it being a slower action rod or a moderate fast rod. But even then, we've learned shaking the tip to determine the wobbliness of a rod doesn't necessarily mean the rod is a moderate fast or a slower action. It's not. The rod could still bend in the first quarter of the tip of the rod, and that's what determines a fast action rod. So what we're finding out and what we've just learned over the years is that that's a baseline to start with. 7'6", medium action, medium power, fast action. Power and action are two totally different things. We'll go into dissecting that, but it's not the same. A Fenwick medium action or medium power rod and a Star rod that's medium and a St. Croix that's a medium power, they're all going to feel a little bit different. They're all going to have different weights. They're all going to bend at a different part of the rod, even though they're considered a fast action. So we'll go into that in depth, but that's the starting point, is to know that when you guys have questions, and some people are realizing when they do the research, wow, all these rods feel a little bit different, but they're all medium rods. What's going on here? Well, come check in with us. We have tested just about darn near every manufactured rod out there right now in the inshore market here in the Southeast. And we can tell you pretty unbiasedly, like, this is really a good bang for buck. This is a good value. And this is what we're looking for, kind of the nitty gritty of it all.
Yeah, we have certainly tried almost everything. If you go into our office, you will see a bunch of different blanks. And I'll give a shout out to some, because a lot of these people are sending them to us, for free, just to test out, and we give them honest feedback. And Cash and Rods has given us quite a few, and everything from Shimano to Daiwa to some of these small ones like Black Pelican, sent us one recently. Those are more the high end custom ones. And of course, Tfo, which we've been using forever. And so let's kind of start there, Luke, because that was really you, and you turned me on to Tfo, and it was a game changer, going from, I don't even remember where we were using that. It was probably just whatever Shimano combo or whatever we had, or pin combo in the past. And all of a sudden you start using this 7.6 Tfo, professional series rod, I believe was what it was still called back then. And game changing. Yeah. Like we were able to launch these little small, really lightweight artificial lures. And it changed everything.
Yeah. It was called the Signature Series back when we found it. But just for people who are confused, which I was for a long time, the difference between action and power, I'm sure Justin was doing this, but you couldn't see him. The action of the rod is, where does it bend? Right. So just have this rod here. So where does it bend? Whoa, I'm about falling over.
You guys are listening. Luke almost wiped out and fell to his chair and broke the rod.
So it's where in the rod does it bend? I guess I have to look backwards. So where does it bend? You can see that the bend is happening towards the tip. That's a fast action rod. A slower and moderate rod is bending more towards the middle, like a fly rod, right? That would be a super slow rod.
That's what you would call a wet noodle, when it's just kind of.
I call wet noodle just the moderate rods. Fly rod would be ultra wet noodle, but and then power is how much force does it take to bend the rod, right? So power is all about the force to bend the rod. Action is where in the rod does the bending happen. So just so you know the difference, and so the actual performance is how the combination is, right? Because you can have a fast action rod that takes hardly anything to bend, and that's where like a bluegill rod, right? It's going to have a fast action, but if you look into a Snook, you're toast. You're out of luck. And then you can have a rod with a strong backbone, but a soft tip, the wet noodle rod, and now you can't set your hook, right? If you're using artificial lures like a weedless jerkbait, you're going to be missing all sorts of strikes because you just don't have that quick power to get the hook set. So
might as well fish with the cane pole.
Yeah, exactly. And so Joe mentioned the Tfo rod. It was the Signature Series when we found it. For whatever reason, they changed the name like 4 years ago to the Professional Series. But it's just a good blend of the power and action, right? The bend and the power to get the bend that really just took up our game, my game in particular, to the next level because it was just so easy to use. It was a well done rod. It has a shorter butt. It has, I think, a good size, the appropriate length of the butt. It has a hook keeper that you can use for weedless hooks. Just like a lot of little small things that in total add up to a big benefit. And it was only like, just like $100, and they've gone up a little bit. It's like 109 now, but it's just a solid rod. It's just a good all-purpose rod. And I went from just kind of having like a certain rod for this, a certain rod for that, to just realizing, hey, like I don't need all this stuff. Let me just get a good all-purpose rod and just get a bunch of them. And when I did that, my game got to the next level. So
and saved a lot of money too, because we were using that TFO $110 rod and $100 reel, like the Dial Fuego, and we're like, man, we're now saving a ton of money and have just honestly better equipment that works.
And it's a good combo, right? This is the rod that Balcony Snook was caught on, right, where it required a very tough cast, that was precision cast, long distance, in a weird situation on a 3 stories up into the water.
Very, very natural situation.
Yeah, happens all the time. But it's just a good tool. It's a good tool, and the benefit, in my opinion, of having a lower variety of rods where we're used to using a consistent rod, is that you just get better with it, right? You kind of like working a lure. Yeah, specialist. Yeah, back to Joe's theme. But it's true. It is absolutely true. And even on tournament fishing, I literally would have 4 rods. I would take 4 setups. They were the exact same rod, the exact same reel, the exact same line. And I was switching from different baits, but even topwaters. And I just found that my overall performance was better when I just didn't overcomplicate things.
What were you about to say, Wyatt? I saw you pulled a rod out of the...
Yeah, I've got the same TFO that Luke was just showing off. I mean, this is, like he just said it, there's so many great things about this rod. When I recommend rods to people, I believe this rod, I'm not saying it's the best one out there, but what I will say is that if you don't know a whole lot about rods and you're looking to start learning and have kind of a baseline for what you should expect out of a rod at a really, really good price, for $99, what you're getting out of this rod, I think it's probably the best value out there for sure. That's not to say that there are some things that I haven't found in other rods that I prefer more. And, we're going to talk about things later on. Probably my biggest, if I was to complain about something, this is really just a personal preference thing. It's the width of the grip. And, I've fished with Luke a lot, and I see that he likes the grips that are a little bit wider. And this is something that's not necessarily going to affect your casting or anything. It's just more a personal preference thing. I just tend to prefer rods that have a skinnier grip. But this rod still always comes out with me because I can cast really far with it. It's got, very good quality blank. The power, the action, it is fantastic. The taper on it, all of it. And it's got, again, that weedless keeper, which is, like Luke said, little things like that on rods really do add up. And the componentry is very good on it as well. I was just grabbing it in case we needed to kind of talk about it a little bit more. But yeah, for sure, I would say in terms of value for someone that doesn't know a whole lot about rods, that's a really good one to kind of start with and have a baseline for what you should be looking for. And then you can kind of build upon what your personal preferences are, what extra, quality components you're willing to spend a little bit more money on. We'll dive into all those things later, but, every rod has pros and cons to it. And that rod is a really good, overall first one to go with if you're really wanting to dive into, some higher quality rods, which you absolutely should if you want to start catching more fish.
Yeah, and I'll throw one more thing in too, and this is the touch on the point that Justin made earlier, and it's just so important to always have this in mind, is the power in action and how it actually feels, and then how different it can be from one brand to the other, even inside the brands, where there's one model from one brand to a different model of the other of the same brand feels totally different. But so this TFO, this is the one that I've been using that I really like is the 7.6. It's a medium power, fast action, right? Using G Loomis, this is the E6X. I like this. This is a much more expensive rod. Their rating system is totally different. So to find the same feel, like if I just had my eyes closed and was doing the tip test, where you just lightly put the tip on the ground and feel the power of the bend and look at the curvature, the similar to, right, the same feel. I had to go to a heavy power rod from the E6X. So the heavy power rod, the heavy power rated rod, still fast action, is what finally I had to go up to have the right feel that I generally like. And then with like Bull Bay and St. Croix, a lot of other brands, it's usually medium heavy. So, but it's not always, right? It's like it's very frustrating that there's not a consistent rating. It shouldn't be that hard, right? It should, like what Justin said, you put on a certain amount of weight, there's your deflection, here's the standard rating system. Unfortunately, that's just not happening.
Yeah, that's like going up 2 shoe sizes, right? It's one thing if you go from like a 10 to 10 and a half in your bowling shoes, you pull up to your favorite bowling alley, which I do pretty much every weekend, and all of a sudden I'm going from 10 to 12. Like, man, that's like clown shoes on the Joe Meister.
So how that is harmful, I think, and how that can be a negative, just a negative on the negative to your performance on the water, is if you went out and you just heard, okay, I need a 7.6 rod, medium power, fast action, right? And you go and get this E6X, which is a good rod, it's a good blank. But if you try to do the same type of fishing, that like inshore fishing with soft plastics, I just always like to hit on that because it's so effective and a lot of people struggle with it. Most of the struggle is because the tip is too light. So if I went for a medium power fast action, I just don't have the power to actually get good hook sets on a consistent basis. So even when I switched on the TFO, I was trying out their different ones. I switched to medium light, and I immediately saw a significant decrease in the hook sets that I was getting, to the point where I was on a good bite. I missed like 4 fish in a row, got frustrated. I made the switch, and my very first cast with the other rod, I got a hook set and caught a red, and then on and on, the more catching than missing. So I just want to emphasize the importance of just matching the rod to your fishing.
Justin, talk about the next chapter, if you will. And we still sell a ton of TFO rods. We're probably one of their bigger sellers there in our store at fishstrong.com. And we still personally buy them. But we also did a deal with Bull Bay, a little bit higher end rod, closer to that, $190, $200 range, where you start talking about some increases in some of the components, and even Cork. I mean, all this stuff, just costs more money. And obviously the blank. So Justin, talk about that real quick.
Yeah, sure. So cost starts jumping up incrementally when you improve your componentry on a rod. The blank itself ends up being the most expensive part of the rod, naturally. And a lot of rods, nowadays they're graphite rods that are built with what we call a carbon fiber pre-preg. So carbon fiber, graphite, you can use the two really universally when it comes to rods specifically, but pre-preg means the sheet of graphite is pre-impregnated with an epoxy in these sheets. What they do when they build out a rod is you take a steel mandrel, you take a steel like rod, basically like solid steel rod, you take this sheet of graphite, you wrap it around this, diameter of a steel rod that's basically like the blueprint of the rod, right? What's going to be the thickness of the rod overall. You wrap the graphite around it, you cook it, okay, and then afterwards you pull the steel rod out from underneath, and you have this graphite stick that's got a certain taper to it and a certain weight overall. And the epoxy, the resin that is inside of this sheet of graphite, is really what's going to start changing, the price of this rod overall. Epoxies can be more dense or less dense, so that overall affects the weight of the rod. Nowadays, people call, epoxies having a nano resin. And what is a nano resin? You'll see nano rod, nano blank, nano resin. A lot of times what that is it's an epoxy that is much lighter or less dense than traditional epoxies, but still maintains the same strength that a $100 rod might have, but it's going to be a lot lighter, and it's ultimately going to affect the action and performance of that rod down the line. So people end up spending more money on a rod because when you start getting into the tech of things, especially the resins, that's really what's going to change the most in the performance of a rod. A rod can jump from $100 to $200 pretty quick, and the biggest thing is going to be that resin that's used. Joe had mentioned Cash and Rods. They actually use, the owner of Cash and Rods, he designed a resin specific to their rods. It makes it a very, very lightweight rod, and the rod overall has a little bit of a slower action, but it's still really nice. Fish in open water, I mean, it would be a great tool. But after the resins, used in the blank itself, the componentry, I mean, all of those guides that are used on a rod and what specific guide you use starts racking up those, the dollar signs on the value of the rod. And it really has to do with, what is a tangle free frame? What is an inline frame? For those of you guys that look, if you look at the Bull Bay custom rods, for those of you that have them, we're going to have a lot more here soon. Luke's holding it up. You'll notice that on the Bull Bay custom rod, that frame is angled ever so slightly upward. And it's really designed to be what's called a tangle-free frame, as opposed to the traditional, guide train that he has down there in the Tfo rods, where it's, that line where the actual ring is at like a straight 90-degree angle to the rod, and you'll see up on the top, the Bull Bay rod has a little bit of a tilt to it. The reason for that is to help make sure that line's not going to get wrapped around the frame. If you got a windy day and you're casting against the wind and your braid's blowing around everywhere, that line's not going to get wrapped around the frame. A lot of times that'll end up increasing the value of a rod. But even more so, what we're finding out is that it's the ceramic inserts that's used. What type of inserts are used inside of that frame? Not the frame so much, but if you take Fuji, for example, Fuji is a very popular name. People have seen that for a long time. Fuji has aluminum oxide and alkanite and SiC, which is silicon carbide. They have torzite, all these names that they call the material of their inserts, but all it is ceramic. It's ceramic. And some are thicker, some are lighter, some are heavier. But when you start jumping up in the quality of that ceramic, you get an insert that's more durable, so it can take impact resistance if you're banging on the car door by accident or banging on your boat. It's less likely to chip. All these ceramic guides nowadays will hold up well to braid, but when you start adding 8, 9, 10 frames on a rod, that starts adding the price up. Those ceramic inserts are really going to jump that price pretty quick. So you see a rod go from $100 to $180 or $200 because it could have an extra guide or two, and the ceramic inserts that are used are 2 or 3 steps higher quality. They're more durable. They're a little more dense. They're a little more polished and smooth. So it does help a little bit with casting distance in the long run. So those are the 2 biggest things. After that, the third part I would say is aesthetics. The reel seat itself, Luke, just the 2 examples we have with Tfo and Bull Bay is kind of a good showcase. With the Tfo rod, you have a traditional reel seat. It's just a composite plastic reel seat with a locking grip up top. But when you look over at the Bull Bay custom rod, what we found is that we can customize this reel seat to where we reduce a little bit of weight overall. It might not be much, but all of these little changes add up to the overall weight of the rod. And in that example with the custom rod, we have a blank through construction. So we have contact with our blank on those days that it's flat calm and we're working an Alabama leprechaun through the grass or in deeper water. And we're just able to pick up on a bite a little bit easier with that through blank construction on the reel seat itself. It's a small difference, but again, all of these little small differences exponentially start adding up, and that's what starts bringing the price of your rod up. But they're definitely intentional. I would say the 3 are the blank material and resin, okay, then the guides, and then I would say some aesthetic features that are either for looks or also for function. I mean, we see that reel seat does make a difference in terms of detecting a bite under really, really calm, stealthy conditions.
Yeah, and just one thing on the guides. This is one of my TFOs, and as you said, right, the components are not going to be quite as good as they will in the higher end ones. So although I love TFOs, I still use them. I have had issues on multiple where you can see this guide is a lot less dark than the one above it. That's because the insert came out, and that'll wreck your line. It'll totally wreck your line. It's obviously easy to see. You'll notice it pretty quickly, but it just happens, right? It happens. It didn't happen overnight. I went through a lot of abuse. It's pretty easily fixable. I don't personally do it. Just a lot of local tackle shops can fix it, but it's just going to be an issue that you run into. Whereas when you have the higher end components, they're going to be much less likely to break. So that's where you get to the point on money, on the performance, the overall longevity being the big factor on the price differences.
Let's talk cork, because I know that there are different types of cork that can make it a whole lot more expensive. And then this whole split grip thing kind of happened in both bass and saltwater. And from what we're hearing from the actual manufacturers, it doesn't really make a difference. Like it's more of just an aesthetic looking thing. It's cheaper because they don't have less cork. What's the deal on cork?
So something I've noticed and I'd like to bring up is there are definitely different qualities of cork. And we can talk about also just overall material that your handle is made out of, because we are starting to see more wind grips pop up as well, and EVA foam, things like that. Obviously, so to kind of explain the differences in cork and how that affects fishing, lower quality cork is going to absorb and kind of not let you feel those vibrations and all the things that are happening on the end of your line where your lure is. With higher quality cork, as you're fishing, your hand is in contact with that cork. The rod, all the vibrations, that travels from the tip all the way back to the butt of your rod. And as that, those vibrations travel back around through the rod, you're going to feel it in your hand. So if you have higher quality cork, you're going to feel more, essentially. So for example, this St. Croix Tournament Legend is one of the most
you froze
that I own.
Second line there. You're back. Oh, I think you're back. He and Justin might be using the same internet right now.
Yeah, see, looks like Justin's name's on there too. How did that happen?
The curse is real.
Oh no, why it's frozen. Well, if you're listening, we're talking about cork. We'll give Wyatt a couple minutes to.
Yeah, I think you're back now.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
Coming in and out. Yeah, maybe I'll continue with what he's saying. I totally. Wyatt there. All right, so I'll continue what he's saying. So the cork, the quality of cork varies to a large extent, and a big reason is because cork is expensive. Like to get the full cork, it's super expensive, and so a lot of companies are making some changes where they're using composite cork. There's now some tape, like some cork tape that they put on the outside,
aka faux cork.
Yeah, and Wyatt, it looks like your video's back. You good?
He's still coming in real slow.
Yeah, and so just as far as it's hard to measure, right? It's right out of the bat, right when you first start using, there's not much of a difference, but over time, as always, you'll have some issues like this one is that TFO. This was so the original ones, they actually had nicer cork. This is probably 5 years old. It's still in pretty good shape. They've since started using a composite, which I don't like quite as much. It's heavier, right? A lot of it comes down to weight. As you add the composite stuff, it gets heavier. And then like going to this G Loomis, this is a very high-end rod. You can see that this cork is just a little bit nicer. Super, just nice and clean, cool looking butt on there. And then the same for the,
this is a family podcast, by the way. You can't say cool looking butt.
Same for the Bull Bay Custom, where it's just a nicer cork. It's an actual cork. It's nicer. Has the inlays, right? There's no performance. It just looks nice. But the quality of cork is a big deal. And then they also have, like, one of my high-end rods is actually, it's an edge rod, and it's actually carbon, so there's no cork at all. And supposedly that has like the best transfer of feel because there's no foam or cork or anything. It's just like straight carbon, and you can feel everything.
It's like $500 on, right?
Yeah, it's a very expensive
or
rod.
more. Yeah. So let's talk about the split grips because it comes up.
Ooh.
You guys both kind of avoided the question.
I can't stand split grips personally. I know a lot of people, they look nice, like they look cool, but as far as utility, I personally can't stand them because when I'm fishing on my paddleboard or even in the boat, and I have the rod and a vertical rod holder, that split grip, I don't even have one next to me because I don't use them very much. But basically what it is, it's in the middle is straight to the blank, and then there's a little grip at the tip of it. And that grip, that little edge catches on the rod holder. Like when I'm on my paddleboard sight fishing, I'm trying to like get the rod up from behind me to make a cast. And then there's that one little hesitation. I've had a lot of fish spook off. And so I personally like them. And when I cast a lot, Justin's back.
Well, Justin's back, at least with the little video. I don't know if we're going to be home or not.
And when I cast a lot,
for like a hot second.
Yeah. And even when casting, just to save energy, right? If out there like on an open flat, just casting for trout or whatever, just to save energy instead of having my second hand on the butt, it's just a lot easier to put my hand right here. And now I'm making that same rod movement, which with less arm movement, right? So I can just have my hands just 3-4 inches apart. And then, with my bottom hand pull back, with my front hand push forward, and I can make the same distance cast with half the movement. So, and when I have my hand on that, just on that, one hand up on the top grip, and then the other hand on the blank, which is much thinner. It just doesn't feel right, and it's just, to me, it's just much easier and feels more comfortable to have the full grip.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on that, Luke. All of the rods that I have for inshore fishing are split grip rods, and I fell victim to believing, that oh, it was going to be an overall lighter weight. Sure, it might contribute a little bit to the overall weight of the rod, but when you put a reel on a rod that has a split grip, as opposed to putting a reel on a rod that has a full cork, that whole combo is going to balance differently. A rod and reel is not going to balance the same way on a split grip rod as it is on a full cork. And I've found that over years I've been using a split grip, and I kind of just got used to it over time. But now, the more that I've played with some full cork options on some higher end custom rods, I've realized that where my tip rests when I'm working a lure, I'm more inclined to have a rod that rests with the tip upward when I have a full cork rod than when I have a split grip rod. My tip tends to fall forward, and it does change how I'm going to work a lure. Luke has a whole video out there of talking about, where you place your tip when you're working a lure, whether you bounce the tip upward or you bounce the tip to the side. If you're working a lure through the grass and you're working it back towards you, sometimes, working that rod tip upward will help you bring that lure up and over the grass as opposed to working it to the side. And, the point being that we have found that the split grip does not necessarily contribute to the performance of the rod. All of my stuff is split grip, but moving forward with some custom rod options we're looking into right now, I'm going to be switching back over to a full cork rod, because I think that's my value is going to be better fit there. Like the rod and reel is going to end up balancing a lot better. It's going to be a little rear weighted, which is going to help me ultimately present my lure a little bit more naturally. So I agree, like that split grip, it hasn't gotten in the way for me, but I've been using it for 9-10 years, that style of a rod. But in a rod holder, it's going to, just chafe and scratch up that blank when you put it in a rod holder, or even in the kayak. I mean, I have it rest in my kayak, and on rough conditions, or if I'm trolling a bait and a 20-inch trout hits it, it's going to scratch up that blank. And, there was really no point in me having that other than the aesthetic of it now. So I will agree, if you could choose between the two, a lot of people will say it's a lighter weight, it reduces weight by 10 or 15%. Sure, it does, but it doesn't. I don't know that it necessarily takes away or adds to the performance. I mean, the power and the action is built into the blank, whether you really have that cork on the back end.
And for those watching, just to mention the balance, there's a whole video on it, but just here's a quick thing. So the balance point is where the rod will naturally rest on one finger. And so if you're listening, just envision yourself just holding the entire rod up horizontally, and then where on the setup does it sit naturally, and that's going to be your neutral point. So if you're grabbing your rod ahead of it, then the gravity will make a rod tip up retrieve, and then obviously if the rod tip is heavy, is towards the tip, then that's going to be better. It's going to be more natural to have a rod tip down retrieve, and then it comes down to the butt length too. So a lot of the split grip rods have longer butts to keep that point to be your natural. Where I prefer it is I like to have it where I normally grab the rod at the neutral point. Then if I want to do a rod tip retrieve, I just hold it a little bit higher up, and if I want to do a rod down retrieve, I just hold it a little bit down, and now I'm not fighting gravity either way. And so for the full grips, again, the benefit of them is just having a little bit more weight in the very far back end. Yes, the split grips do make the rods a little bit lighter, at least in most cases, but that's going to mess up, at least in the cases that I've experimented with, it messes up the balance where you actually do want some weight in the butt section so that you can have that balance point.
And we were with one of the larger rod, like custom rod manufacturers and seller of component parts for custom made rods, probably in the country. And, he said, I could care less about how light the rod is. Obviously you still want it light, but he's like, it's all about balance. He's like, that changes everything. So don't worry about the split grips and hey, it's 10% less in terms of weight. He's like, you want a balanced rod, which goes hand in hand with the reel. If you guys were listening, Luke had the reel on there too. It wasn't just holding the rod up, just to be very, very clear. And so
line too. It needs to be the
yes.
reel plus the line, like whatever you're going to be in the natural environment. Some people weigh the reel, just to take the weight of the reel without the line. You need to have everything.
Yep. So balanced rod is key. So Wyatt, we got you back. I think he's back.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, he's back.
There we go. Awesome. Yeah. So in fact, I do have a split grip here in front of us to kind of piggyback on what I was about to say. We're talking about materials and things. You can see with this split grip, the materials are a little bit different. So the wing grips are not made of cork, which affects the weight differently in the balancing. This is one of those custom rods I was talking about earlier that I had made. This one's from Black Pelican, and this one was made to my specifications. With 90% of the other rods I'm going to use stock options, I'm going to go with a full grip rod, but I did like that this one was set up with the wing grips. It balances differently. So the material again of your grips is going to change the balance. As you guys can see, if I hold this right here, it's balanced actually pretty well, even with that light back. You can see it's been cut down a lot. There is a really good counterweight back here, so it is balanced really well. I've got the Daiwa Ballistic on here, which is a pretty light inshore reel. It's 2,500. As you guys can see, this rod has some of the nicest components you can have. That exposed blank with that ALS reel seat, Alps reel seat. But these wing grips, we're talking about grip structure. I asked for this foregrip here, which you don't see on a lot of rods. I asked for it to be extended. So that changes the balance out a lot. And the reason for that is just the way that I like to work my lures. My top waters, you can see there's actually a pretty good indent right here, where as I'm walking the dog, I'm tapping right here. So again, what you're using the rod for and the balancing of it is going to change, what you're going to want out of a rod. In terms of materials, if I'm getting a cork rod, I'm always going to go with a full grip. I find that the weight of cork you can go between tons of different materials of cork, but I find that most corks are going to weigh generally about the same. And I'm always going to want to go with a full grip just because they balance better in the full grip than I've found with split grip cork rods. But with these wing grips, it seems like they're much lighter material, and there's a lot of counterweight that goes into wing grip butts. And I just find that, you can play around with different components, but I do prefer full grip rods most of the time. Again, this was a custom rod that I had set up, which 90%, of people aren't going to need. But that's another thing to kind of keep in mind is what componentry are you going to use that's going to affect the balancing of that rod. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
Yep. And so now to fast forward to today, I mentioned a rod builder. So it's Mudhole. If you guys, for those of you who have made any kind of repairs on your rods or even built a custom rod, you certainly know who Mudhole is. They've been around for many decades and probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, seller of rod components and blanks in America. They're massive. And so we went to their home office, and it's like we pull up, and I've known Mudhole for a long time, and I had no idea how big they were. Like I'm talking like 72 or 75,000 square foot building. Like we're looking up like, oh my gosh, this is massive. And, they've been watching us, and Justin had a good connection there. Even my buddy, Tim Hassett, one of my good friends, his next door neighbor just started working there. So all these things kept coming back to Mudhole. And just so you know, because we want some feedback here, if you've made it this far, we're working with them to create really what we would consider the perfect all around. That doesn't mean it's going to be the end all be all of everything, but we're just trying to find like the ideal rod for inshore saltwater anglers like us who fish with 2,500 to 3,000 series reels and are doing a little bit of both artificial lures and live bait, something that's just going to all around be an amazing value, last a really long time, and have really, really good components. So really, really excited about that. And so we love your feedback. We'd love for you guys to let us know what's important to you. And one thing we kind of touched on it, but even the length of the butt. Hollywood had one we were fishing with. It was a really long butt, like, I don't know, 11, 12 inches. And I felt I kept hitting myself in the stomach with it. And part of it, I need to work on my abs, I guess. But, versus like, I think the TFO is a 9-inch. So you get 2 extra inches on the end. And when you're doing hard cast, sometimes it's like hitting you in the chest, especially if you have a little bit extra in the belly. So we're trying to look at all of that stuff. And there is so many pieces that go into it. We were in there for like 3 hours with them last time, and Justin was in like hog's heaven, just looking at, they have this massive conference table with like every kind of component you can imagine. And it's just like mix and match. What do you guys like this? What do you like here? And then we didn't even talk about colors and stuff. That was just to find the right component. So we're really, really, really stoked on that. And still, this is going to be a long working process. We're not going to put our name on something just like Bull Bay until we know it's amazing and that we've used them. It could take a year, honestly. So it's just not going to happen overnight, but we want feedback. We love to hear, if there's a certain size or a certain power, certain action, certain types of reels you're using. Because that's back to the whole having a well-balanced rod and reel. You have to take the reel into the equation as well.
Yeah,
what do you got there, Luke?
I got
Justin.
Go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, I was going to say I think the most exciting part about all of this is that, we've said it many times. We have a lot of experience, and we've all been avid fishermen for a long time, and we want to share our experiences and our skill set with you guys to help you be better. But we'll be the first to say that, we're always learning new things too. And in meeting with Mudhole, we've realized that there is this entirely different planet of information when it comes to rod materials, construction, components. I mean, they are absolutely next level. Like they fully understand it. And it's sometimes like speaking Cantonese when we're learning about materials used in rods today and how it affects actions. They're steps ahead, and they place emphasis on education. Like us, we passing along this information and educating you guys so that you can make a better purchasing decision and be better, better equipped on the water to target whatever you want to target. We love that they're able to teach us that. We can share the information with you. They're a great, resource when it comes to learning more about rods in general, building your own rods, choosing the right type of rod. Some of the verbiage that they use when they talk about a mag bass blank or a spin jig blank, or, they have codes of NEPS, and we're like, wait, what does all this mean? And it's just it's a whole world of information that, we're learning and getting to share with you guys. We're really excited about. So, that's the coolest thing. We're looking forward to having more, cool information to share with you guys. That's really just like, a gold mine of new stuff for everyone. So we're really excited about that.
What you got, Luke?
Yeah, I was going to just show the difference on the butt length and why that's important. So I have 2 rods, right? They're both 7'6" rods. So the butts are at the same point. You can see over here, and where the reel sits compared to the butt is very different. And it's, in this case, it's a couple inches. So here's the top part of the reel on the rod on the bottom. This is the Bull Bay Custom. And then here is the seat on the other one. So that's going to be a 2-inch shift forward. And that's going to have, again, more butt. And it's good, but that's also going to have less casting, right? Less forward part of the rod. And at least in my opinion, for inshore fishing, having more of a tip is a very important thing, because that's what controls your casting distance.
Having more rod, less butt.
Yeah, more rod, less butt. Yeah, and because the rod, the forward part is what's doing the cast. And as far as casting distance, we're targeting big fish that are spooky up in shallow water. The longer you can cast, the more fish you're going to catch. It's one of the few things that we have 100% control over, and it's one of the few things that, as you increase your casting distance, you're going to catch more fish. That if you need to get better, that's a very, very good place to start. And so, just based on physics, right? The longer that rod is, the faster the tip speed is going to be. With the same power cast, the lure's going to go further. And so, the benefit of having a longer butt is when you're fighting a fish, you can have more. You can basically rest the butt on on your elbow. So we've been trying to perfect the right side, right? When you're holding the rod naturally, where does that butt sit? So we're trying to get the perfect blend of having the power for the bigger fish while also having the casting distance for hooking those bigger fish. So that I don't think there's a perfect one size fits all answer like most things, but that's just one of the things we're testing. So I have a bunch of different rods here, and I'll be going out and just testing the castability versus fightability of the rods. And that's going to be a big part of the overall selection.
Definitely. Cool. This is super, super helpful. I'm really pumped. And all we ask in return is you made it this far. Now, you know, kind of what we're working on behind the scenes. Let us know, give us some feedback. You know, we have depending on if you're listening in the car, working out, wherever you are, go to saltstrong.com. You'll see the fishing tips up at the top, and you'll see this podcast, in the pursuit of the perfect fishing rod, or inshore fishing rod, I think is going to be the final title. Is we're kind of recording this and figuring it all out. But leave us a comment. We love this. It comes right to us. We get to read every one, and we'll probably have more of these as we kind of whittle it down. Right now, we've got a lot of rods we're testing out and a lot of different butts and blanks and components, and we're just going to keep whittling it down to the ones we think are the absolute best for our insider members. And these first rods, just like the Bull Bay, it'll be insider members only. So if you're not a member, what are you waiting on? Just one more reason to join us in the club. And of course, you'll get 20% off. And we start talking about $100, $200, $300 rods, because we will have different levels. We want to have kind of the value one for sure, kind of like the Tfo. And then we're going to have some that are going to be a little bit more expensive for those like Wyatt, who, and even Luke, who don't mind spending $400 or $500 on a really, really nice, like over the top, amazing rod. And then something kind of in the middle, kind of like that Bull Bay that we did in that, 190 range. So that is the plan. We're really, really pumped, and we really, really want your feedback. So please go leave us a comment there in the blog post. Of course, if you're on YouTube, we do get those comments. We just don't get them as quickly. And it, quite honestly, sometimes we miss them, because especially if it's been a while, we don't go back to some of these old YouTube videos, where if it's on our blog, it always comes to us, even like 2 years later, it'll still hit us, and we'll know that you left a comment. So please, please, please go to the blog, which is saltstrong.com, fishing tips up at the top, and you'll see that post there, or you can search for it under the pursuit of the perfect fishing rod. Other than that, I don't know if we lost Wyatt and Justin. I just see little thumbnail images. Hopefully you guys are still there.
Oh yeah, still here. Just trying to manage this internet connection. Looks like everyone came home for lunch in my area, so taking up the bandwidth.
It's crazy technology day.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, awesome job, Wyatt. Justin, thank you for adding a ton of great dialogue and some really fancy words. Now I got to go look them up, figure out what the heck they mean. Justin, blink twice if you're still here.
Go with the higher end rod.
It's the ghost of Christmas past. Justin.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome.
The ghost of the rod, Father.
Well,
Get the nano resin. Oh yeah, no, not too many $5 words today, but we can go into it. We can pre-preg, carbon fiber pre-preg, maybe that's up there.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, pre-preg.
We didn't throw out superfluous. Superfluous was in previous ones. That's on the list.
I'm still
For
trying
anybody
to look that up.
Anybody that just tunes in for the $5 words from Justin, I appreciate you guys.
And of course, just like last time, specialist or simplicity specialist was the kind of the theme of, I wrote down on this one, no combos, don't do the combos. The rod is more important than the reel. You need both. You obviously need line as well. But as Luke said, if he could pick, obviously you have to have all three to catch a fish, or at least it helps. The rod first, and then the line, and then the reel. So the rod is absolutely critical, which is why we're going to spend so much time kind of perfecting this rod, because it's really doing all the work. And it does separate you from catching more fish than the person on the boat next to you. We've had it countless times where either Luke's fishing with someone, I'm fishing with someone, we're together fishing with someone who's got an inferior rod, and they might even spend more time on the water and be an amazing fisherman if we can make those just slightly better cast. And especially when you're talking about on the flats and having a little bit more distance, it is absolutely game changing. Luke's, what your analogy was, is like football field every hour if you're making long casts with lures. And if you can get an extra 10 to 20, 30 feet every cast versus the person on the boat next to you, I mean, do the math on that in terms of making a certain amount of casts per hour. That's an extra football field of being in like the perfect spot, of being like in the prime time. I am, right where the fish are, the least likely for the fish to know I'm there. It is absolutely game changing.
Yeah, and that's one of the few things we do that will actually guarantee we'll catch more fish, is to increase our casting distance. So it goes along with the rod, and then second is the line, and then a very distant third for inshore fishing. For bait casters is different. Bait caster reels have a big part of the actual cast. For spinning reels, all they do is get out of the way, right? It's all about the line and the rod. So yeah, just make sure to put more time in that. Something I still need to do more of. I'm still testing out different lines, looking for the best one, just so that we all can make the best of our time on the water.
Amen. Well, guys, we appreciate you. Once again, one more reason to be an insider member. We got the Bull Bay rods coming very soon because they're already in production. We got the TFOs coming, a bunch of them coming back. And of course, insider members can only get that Bull Bay. And a lot of really cool stuff we're coming out with this summer for our members. So just one more reason to be a member. We appreciate you guys so much, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think and what kind of rods, even the type, meaning the brand, the power of the action. Leave us all that stuff. We'd love your feedback on this as we perfect the perfect rod. We out. Peace. See you guys.
See ya.